Hey everyone, my name is Penny Zanker, and it's time to reset. This podcast goes beyond just navigating change. It's about new ways of thinking about how you can approach challenges, how you can shift your mindset when needed, create some space and grace for yourself so that you can rethink, recharge, and reprioritize when and where needed. Are you ready to unlock your full potential? Thank you for hitting play and sharing this next episode with me. It's time to reset. Hello, and welcome to Take Back Time. My name is Penny Zanker, and I'm your host. And today we are going to talk about a controversial topic of polarity. No, we're not going to talk about politics, but maybe we'll play with it a little bit. But we're going to talk about how you can leverage it with your teams to use it as a positive source for your leadership. And I have the expert today with us, Tim Ash. He's also a good friend. We just went through a great speakers course together at Heroic Public Speaking. Let me tell you a little bit about Tim. He's helped create over $1.2 billion in value for companies like Google, Expedia, and Nestle. So genius, right? He's been cited by Forbes and Entrepreneur Magazine as a top online marketer. He is best-selling author of multiple books, including his latest, which is Unleash Your Primal Brain. And he's delivered hundreds of keynotes in 4 different continents, shares insights about psychology and persuasion. And he may be the best self-taught salsa dancer, so he says, right, that you're likely to meet today. So without further ado, Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Penny. It's great to be with you.
We'll see you do some dance moves.
All right. Well, it's a little hard on a webcam. I need room to perform.
That's true. Well, so give us a little background. What's your story?
Well, the short version, the long version is in college. I was studying cognitive science and computers and then stayed on for grad school for 7 years in the PhD program in what would now be called artificial intelligence and neural networks. And then I quit and started my first digital marketing agency. And as you mentioned, I was running that for 25 years and helping companies understand how to persuade people. And after I exited my company and sold it to business partners, I went back to public speaking and my first love, which is how does the brain work, which is the basis of all persuasion. And that took me to evolutionary psychology, which is our brains evolved in a particular environment and the stuff we picked up along the way is still in there. Some of it we share with insects, other stuff with mammals. And at the end of that evolutionary arc, there's the distinctly and bizarrely human stuff that makes us so different.
Makes us so bizarre as we are, right? So
Indeed.
Very challenging and fun and right, all the crazy things that make us up. That's fantastic. So is that what brought you from the online world into what you're speaking about and working in today, which is around this topic of polarization?
Yeah, I guess you could say that this is just one part of evolutionary psychology, which I find to be foundational to everything. You want to be a good leader? Study evolutionary psychology. You want to be a good human being? You want to have better relationships? You want to have a happier life? All of it is based on how our brain evolves. So it's really not a leap. I'm just going back to kind of first principles. And within that evolutionary psychology broad thing, I've been talking to a lot of business leaders that the biggest issue that they have these days is we're living in very polarized times. Of course, that's at the political level. It's also within companies and even within small teams. It seems like we're about as far apart as we can get these days in a lot of things.
That's absolutely true. And when I think of polarization, right, and I think of politics and social issues and things that are all around us, I think of I don't know why, but it brings up like a primal feeling, right? Of talking back to the primal brain, right? Of that we're like with our tribe and this is where we stand and you're not going to move us and we're going to fight you until the end to fight for our belief system. Is that reaction or that feeling that I have, is there some basis to that?
Oh, absolutely. And that's what I'm saying. This stuff is really deeply in our DNA. It's why, like a plague of locusts, we've taken over the whole planet. I mean, 10,000 years ago when agriculture started, there was roughly 1 million people on the planet. Now there's 8 billion people. I mean, so we've been successful in every possible niche on the planet. And the way we got there was by being really, really loyal to our tribe. Now, initially, when we're go back a couple 100,000 years ago to the plains of East Africa, everything came from our tribe. The key thing here to understand is, as individuals, we can't survive. We're really weak. We have really bad senses, or slow, or stupid, or basically blind and can't smell anything compared to other animals. So the way we survive is by learning the cultural package of the tribe that was in that environment, learning everything that the tribe knows. That's our edge. And so really we evolved to be blind loyalists that need to transmit that cultural package. In other words, if everybody questions everything that the tribe does, it wouldn't be very cohesive. Knowledge wouldn't spread very fast. And other tribes that we come into contact with that are more solid and more unified, they're going to take over. I mean, they're either going to outbreed you, kill you, convert you. It's not going to be a good outcome. So I guess it's a two-step thing. One is we can't do it alone, and we have to be blind loyalists for our tribe. And we grew up in an environment where we polarized against other tribes in order to survive.
So in the organization, right, if we were to look at that, that might be where we see silos where people don't work together, or cliques where some people work together and some people don't. Like, how do you see that showing up?
So the big change was, if we spent our whole life with a few dozen people, maybe a third of them were our genetic relatives to some degree, that was our whole cultural package. Religion, technology, social organization, rituals, entertainment, everything was inside of that little tribe of 100 to 200 people. Problem is, in a modern civilization, we live in overlapping tribes. Those you can see the video, a member of the aerodynamic haircut tribe. I shave my head, right? I'm a member of the immigrant tribe. I wasn't born in the US. So some of these tribes are voluntary, like brands. You might be an iPhone loyalist, for example. A lot of Apple people are, you can almost think of that as a cult. Some of these are voluntary tribal associations. Others are forced upon us. Others we're born into. We don't choose where we're born, the color of our skin, usually what religion we're born into. So a lot of those things are really fundamental. But so we have all these overlapping tribal identities. And when you look at this in the workplace, there's kind of three levels of it that I've seen where polarization happens. One is at the executive suite level. Another one's across departments. Like you say, oh, that's marketing, and we're in sales, or we're in production, or we're in HR or legal, or whatever your job function is. And I've even seen polarization between the companies and their outside environment, like who they're selling to. So for example, Chick-fil-A, they use a political example, is known for the founders are religious based, conservative, and that's great. But if you're trying to sell chicken sandwiches to everyone that wants chicken sandwiches, you're going to alienate some people. They'll never buy a chicken sandwich for you. They'd rather go to El Pollo Loco instead.
Right. Because especially if you're closed on Sundays and you want a chicken sandwich on Sunday, you got to go somewhere else.
There you go. But my point is, you can have polarization between the company and its audience or the clients that it serves. So the polarization can happen inside the C-suite, across departments, or even within and outside of the company.
And it's my understanding, right, that, we're full of contradictions as well. So don't we as individuals also have our own sort of polarization within us? Like the polarity of being and doing, we have this thing where we're busy and have to do, but we also need time to rest. And right, there's also some polarity.
Yeah. There's being and doing. In Jungian terms, that would be kind of the lover versus the warrior archetypes. And the lover is all about being in the moment, about the beauty of the world, avoiding pain, seeking pleasure. The doer is the warrior, would be about, I guess you could say, getting stuff done, discipline, mission in service to the realm. There's other axes too. For example, change versus order. You have magicians and transformational type of people in the world. You also have stewards that want to protect the current way of doing. They're more traditional, keepers of the existing order. So there's a dynamic kind of polarity as well. So being versus doing, and change versus order. Yeah, absolutely. So this happens inside of human beings
both
as
are
well.
Necessary to see success, right? In context, is you need both. You need a balance of both, right?
Yeah, and my friend David Gruder very, I think, shrewdly came up with this framework that I just described. And he talks about the sovereign, so the king or the queen, the orchestra conductor, if you will, that says, okay, we have these four energies available to us: being, doing, change, order. What does the current situation in the moment call for? What mix of those? So you have to have full access to each of those dimensions, but you also have to have a purpose, a connection to source, or whatever you want to call it, a vision for why you're doing it. And then that is what determines which tools or instruments to use in the moment, what energies to manifest.
Makes sense. Makes sense. You said there were 3 areas in the organization, right? The departments and then even the outside world. How do leaders take advantage, or what do they do to manage and use polarity as a positive source in their leadership?
Yeah, well, the way I believe to turn polarization to an ally is to, in the context of companies, what I call building the primal brain company. So being based on these kind of evolutionary psychology, foundational things. The first step is what I call tribe spotting. In other words, you have to take an inventory of which tribal allegiances are out there in your workforce and in your company. And some of them might be obvious, which departments, seating areas, and so on. But it could be water cooler talk or what people do after work or what they bring with them to work. It's their existing associations. And so the way to think about it is, again, all these overlapping tribes are there in the background. The question is, which one is activated? Which one is like the most important in the context of work? So first you have to take an inventory and see what's in the way of you building an effective work tribe. What are the existing overlapping allegiances? The second step is to create the cultural package. Remember, every tribe, like I said, when we're wandering around the plains of East Africa, every tribe had a complete cultural package. So this is not your mission statement that was worked out by committee and it's on your lobby wall. This is all the behaviors, the language, the processes, the organization, the values, the technologies you use, all of that, the stories you tell. That's the cultural package of your work tribe. And it's really important to get every part of that. It's not, like I said, just in your HR manual somewhere. And it's also important, this is critical, to define what you stand against. Seems a little counterintuitive, but if you're going to stand for something, like I said, polarization is not optional. So you have to say, what are we polarizing against? These are not our values. We would never do that. We would never behave in this way or do these things. So you have to be super clear.
The must and the must nots.
Yeah. So in a way, it's a filter. It's like, we want these kind of people and we don't want these kind of people. I really don't believe that you can just have a work environment where every individual is happy and fulfilled and is yet completely an individual with different beliefs and values. It's very unlikely. Right. It's very hard to build that because what's the unifying thing is that I'm going to spend time looking at every one of my coworkers to understand their uniqueness. And that's where all my time's going to go. Nothing productive is going to get done at work.
Right. Well, and I guess that's why we have organizations that are so highly disengaged, is because they're not aligned in this cultural package. They're not a fit. And so,
yeah, you're not doing anyone any favors. I mean, if their cultural package doesn't match yours and they won't get sort of converted into yours, I'll talk about how to do it in a second, then it's really kind of like a bad apple. Somebody's going to be dissatisfied. They're going to complain. They're going to undermine other people. And so I've done that. I got out of one of my past employers by complaining to my coworkers for about 6 months about how crappy it was there. And that was enough for me to create momentum to leave the company psychologically, but I did a lot of damage to my coworkers in the meantime. So I'm not advocating that. So be super clear about what you want and also what you don't want, and create that cultural package at the executive level. Be sure you address all of those issues.
Leading in this way, I mean, that seems to me like it'd be a really interesting interview question. What do you stand for and what do you stand against? So, yeah,
what are your values? Or ask things about the values hierarchy. So like in this situation, here are 2 competing values. Which one's more important to you? So it's not your standard interview questions, that's for sure.
Right.
But that gets us perfect transition to the how. So the first step was tribe spotting, doing an inventory of existing tribes. The second was consciously creating this cultural package. And the third is what I call positive polarization. So I talk about the positive polarization toolkit. Polarization's got this negative association, but you can use 5 strategies to reliably bond any group. And they are uncertainty. We key into things more if we're not sure of what the rules are around us or how to behave or what to do. The second is peer pressure. And it's not always, I'm not talking about negative peer pressure like gang jump-ins or something like that, but it's very hard to go against, especially the unanimous behavior of people around us. So you're norming just by showing them what other people are doing. The third is synchronized group activities, rituals that involve synchronized behavior, whether it's doing the wave at a sporting event or singing along at a concert or doing Tai Chi or yoga. You don't even have to like the people doing it with you, but you'll feel this sense of well-being by just participating in synchronized group activities. Mm-hmm. The fourth is difficult initiations. A lot of companies will say, hey, welcome to, you're our new employee. Here's a coffee mug with our logo on it. It's like, oh boy, I feel really valued now. So that doesn't work. There's got to be effort involved. If it's not hard, if you don't share the struggle of getting into the tribe, then you don't value it that much. It's like a throwaway almost. There's not that much allegiance. And the final one, and this is where it comes back to leadership, is the impeccable example of the leaders. They have to embody the values of the tribe. A lot of leaders don't. They say, we really care about our employees, but we're a sales-led organization. So get me those numbers every quarter. So if there's disconnects like that at the top, there's a lot of attention being paid to how the leaders behave, and they have to be in full integrity all the time. That's their job. Create and support that cultural package with their example. So uncertainty, peer pressure, synchronized group activities, difficult initiations, challenging initiations, and the behavior of the leaders. So that's the how you do it.
Interesting. That's really fascinating. I'm kind of drawn and fascinated by the difficult initiation, like, be the example, like that makes sense to me. Like, and they all make sense, but like that one reminds me of like, sorority in college or
yes.
like, these different groups that you have to like go through. And I get it. Like it makes sense. So what are some examples? You gave some great examples with some of the other ones, like you said, the wave, and so that people could connect what that could mean. I'm curious. I didn't hear any examples on that one. What are some initiations? And I think I remember one or two from some companies, but I'm just curious what you would say.
Well, they can take many forms. And by the way, I'm not advocating physical pain, like drink beer till you're blackout drunk at your sorority. Yeah. So those things will continue. They're not going away because they serve such a powerful bonding purpose. So there's always going to be excess in sorority or fraternity initiations. There's others like Navy SEALs or elite special operations forces. They have notoriously high attrition rate. You have to want it, and you unring the bell to leave the Navy SEAL training. You just like, I've had it, so
I forget.
Okay. That's how it works. So basically like 10-20% of people might make it through a particular SEAL training class, but that those people have no quit. And that if you're on a mission, your life depends on them, they'll be there for you. That's an extreme form. That's probably the strongest one. But pretty much any activity you think of, you have difficult initiations if it's meaningful. Workforce, that might be just difficult interviews. I mean, a lot of high-tech companies like Google, how many rounds of interviews do you have? Oh, first you have the one with HR, then your immediate supervisor, then the group, or they beat up on you in a group interview, and whatever. You're really making it hard. And then you go through that and you go, wow, everybody in this company, if I make it to the other side of that, has been through that ordeal. And so have I, and that bonds you more closely to them. So don't just give it away. Make it maybe difficult isn't the word, challenging and effortful maybe is a better way to put it.
Well, and I think, was it Zappos that's known for, right? They'll pay you to leave the company. In your first couple of weeks, they'll pay you a bonus to leave. So kind of like the hurdle that you get to jump across to make that extra commitment that you're going to stay.
Perfect example. That's right. Because actually, it was well known that if you have a dissatisfied, low engagement employee, that's actually costing you money. Right. And so it's better to know that up front before the rotten apple spoils the whole barrel of apples.
For sure. And it's attractive for somebody who's not happy there to take that, right? It also makes me think of, I read something recently about onboarding, and it was a very large percentage, more than 60% of people decide in their onboarding process whether they're going to stay in the organization or not. And it made me think of like when my son went off to college, like they have everybody in these t-shirts and everybody's there like cheering you on. Like you pull up and like this flux of people, they come from out of everywhere and they take everything out of your car. And before you know, it's literally like 10 minutes. And that car that was completely full is unloaded and everything is in his room, right? I can imagine, because that stuck with me. And I can imagine how some of these initiations or whatever you want to, these special circumstances could really stick and bond.
Yeah. And then if you think about it, this is just about every religion is based on these 5 principles. I mean, like I say, uncertainty. That's one of the strongest tribal affiliations, religion. So uncertainty, you have peer pressure, you have synchronized group activities, difficult initiations. You might be baptized. You're being dunked into water in front of all your peers and family or something like that. And the example of the leaders, well, hopefully good example of religious leaders. But the point is, if you think back to the group you felt the strongest kind of allegiance to or belonging in, my guess is probably all 5 of these strategies in the positive polarization toolkit were combined to get you there.
Very cool. Those are the steps. I'm interested in, I don't know, maybe you've got something else in another direction you want to take this, but I'm interested also to talk a little bit more about uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just take a moment, because I get how uncertainty together binds you. Like when you're looking to innovate something because there's been a big change in the marketplace, everybody comes together and works hard to come up with a solution. But uncertainty can also break people apart. It can break down trust.
The uncertainty has to be shared. Now, this is well known in politics. It's called negative campaigning. But here's the basic idea that if you think you're an individual, you can't survive by yourself. So in uncertain circumstances, you fall back on the tribal knowledge. You fall back on that common cultural package. So it's much easier to people to bond and activate group cohesion if there's uncertainty or risk or something like that going on. We all know that there are rules and there are social rules, and we just kind of fall back on group behavior rather than individual initiative. So in uncertainty, we'll even override our own direct life experience and parrot the cultural beliefs of our tribe instead, because that's the safe thing, because the wisdom of the tribe is much stronger than our individual single lifetime of experience.
Yeah. I mean, I get what you're saying. I guess I'm just, as a leader, I get that maybe you'd say, here's this change, AI is coming. And if we don't do something together and come up with a solution, I just see a lot of things breaking down with uncertainty where it's every man for himself, right?
Well, I'm not talking about chaos. Yeah, there's a certain centripetal forces. If they're strong enough, the group won't hold together. There's no question. But what I'm talking about more is in situations that you're uncertain, you'll key off of the behavior of the people around you, which kind of ties it to the peer pressure side of things.
Yeah, give us an example of what a leader would do to utilize that.
Well, I'm just saying, like on a personal level, let's say you went to another country on vacation. You know their social rules and you know they're different from your country. So you're kind of drink things in. You're much more receptive to the different cues. Oh, they don't tip here, or they only tip 5% here, not 22% like some of the restaurants here in San Diego. Or people don't smile, or they want more room between you on the bus. You're more open. You're like a sponge if you're uncertain. Uncertainty doesn't mean chaos. It just means outside of your typical comfort zone.
Right. So I'm still interested in, so what does a leader do? Because these are things that leaders can do, right? So what would be an example that would be from that leadership perspective, how they can help people to...
Well, I'll give you an example of how all 5 can be combined. So about 4 years ago, I went through a men's initiation weekend through the Mankind Project. And the idea was, you take a hard look at yourself and you hopefully come up with insights about how to be more purpose-driven without any belief systems attached, but basically dig into your work and become a better person. So how did it go? Well, first, you arrive, you did not know the agenda of that weekend. They didn't tell you what was going to happen, why it was happening, what was coming up next, none of it. That's the uncertainty part. You just have to kind of surrender to it and be open, okay? Peer pressure, you're looking at people around you and you're, because of that uncertainty, norming off of their behavior. Synchronized group activities, pretty much the whole weekend was us doing things either in parallel or the same stuff, but taking turns. Difficult initiation, it was like a lot of psychological deep digging and it wasn't easy. And then the staff that ran the initiation, you're looking at them as an example of what you'd be like on the other side. And you're like, whoa, those people embody what I want to be. Right. So it's not like uncertainty is by itself. It's combined in this cocktail with this other stuff. But for example, not even knowing the agenda, we're going to do a team building today. All I'm going to tell you is bring a pair of hiking shoes and some mosquito repellent and wear comfortable clothes and bring a change of underwear. Okay, now, what do you know about that team building experience? Nothing. You're like, what the hell? I don't even know what I'm stepping into. Good. Right. That's the uncertainty part.
Right. It's understood. I guess you're not encouraging leaders to not define
goals. No. I'm not saying create chaos. I mean, don't be Elon Musk.
Right. Awesome. Well, this is so interesting. I hope you don't mind me probing with different questions.
No, not at all. These are great questions.
I'm being the people who are listening too, right? Because if I'm not understanding 100%, or I think they might have a question, then I like to voice it.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
So what haven't I asked you yet that is really relevant? Because we're coming to the end of our time for this first call. I mean, we can always dig deeper into another podcast, but what did I not ask you that's really important and relevant for people to know?
Well, again, I think that I mentioned that I believe evolutionary psychology is the basis of a lot of wisdom, that really having a clear understanding of how we evolved and why, that I described in my book, Unleash Your Primal Brain, is not just good for teams, it's good for relationships, it's good for the individual. All of this stuff applies at the individual level. And I know that you have this focus on taking back time. I'm going to give one personal tip, if I may, of how to lead a more effective life. Don't shortchange your sleep. Our tendency is to pack as much as we can into our day. I have a whole chapter on sleep in the book and the evolutionary reasons for it. Don't rob yourself of sleep. 7 to 9 hours, ideally on the similar schedule every day. That's daily life support. If you don't do that, you're not creative. You can't read. You can't learn anything new, physical or mental. You misread people and think that they have aggressive intent. And basically, there's no form of life on earth that lives longer than a few days that doesn't have some form of sleep. So put your phone in another room, go to bed at a reasonable hour, get 7 to 9 hours of sleep, or you're not going to function very well. So the best way to take back time is to devote more time to sleep.
Yeah. So I'm working on that. I've got my little Aura ring and I'm tracking it. People have this expression, right? Sleep when you're dead. And I always say, well, you're dead when you're dead, right?
Well, if you don't sleep, you'll be dead sooner. I think is the best way to put this.
So I think that's good advice. I was just talking to somebody today about how so many people are on edge. We know when we don't sleep, how you're just like any little thing could blow you over, right? The edge where you're angry or crying.
Yeah.
So, and that's where people are. They're just in that edge that you could...
From the sleep deprivation. I mean, that's what they use to torture people. They break them down mentally by playing loud music and blasting them with cold air and not letting them sleep. So you're absolutely right. If you don't get enough REM sleep, which is, again, that 7 to 9 hours, there's several cycles that are tail weighted during that time, then you misread people's micro expressions. Then you think that you get more paranoid. You think that they have aggressive intent towards you. So all of your social calibration, the ability to work in groups goes away.
Right. That's interesting. I didn't know that your social calibration goes away. That's really interesting. Well, there you have it, people. Sleep. So right now, whatever bedtime you have, and I like to say, set a bedtime, right? So get more sleep, set a bedtime that you know that you can control. And so that also means that if it's time to watch another episode of Netflix, no, it's my bedtime. I'm going to go to bed and I'm going to get a good night's sleep. So awesome. Tim, where can people find more information about you, your books, and what you're speaking about today?
Well, the easiest place is to go to primalbrain.com. Like, there's several editions of my book, including the audio book, if you want to listen to me for a few hours. Some people prefer that. I narrated it myself. Or timash.com. That's the other one. So primalbrain.com, mostly focused on the book and the evolutionary psychology, and timash.com.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it was my absolute pleasure, Penny.
And thank you all for being here. This was good stuff. Really interesting, really a unique and individual perspective that can help you as a leader. And then on top of that, you got the best taking back time advice: get more sleep. So get some more sleep, and we'll see you in the next episode. My name is Penny Zenker, and this is Take Back Time. See you then. Hey, thank you for spending this time with me. It really means a lot. If you're feeling a little off, distracted, overwhelmed, stuck, or just out of sync, remember that's your signal to reset. And that's all it takes, just recognizing one reset moment at a time. So stay tuned for more tips, tools, tricks, stories, strategies, all here on Time to Reset. We'll see you in the next episode.